Hey video folks, sorry, just started it a little bit late, but for this lecture we're trying to code absolute value. If it's positive, we just want the value to stay positive. If it's negative, we convert it to a positive. We saw this code didn't work here because if you put in a positive number, we're always multiplying by -1 and it comes out as -4. So we're trying to see how to fix it. And what the class suggested was we can do an if statement to see whether the users inputted a positive or negative value. So in this part here where we're calculating the absolute value, the syntax is we put the word if, all lowercase, and then parentheses and curly braces. So it looks very similar to how we're defining int main, but the two aren't actually related, even though it uses the same symbols. This is defining a function, and this is defining an if statement. So they look very similar, but they're not actually the same. So just a note there. In the parentheses, this is where we put our conditions. So anything in the parentheses has to come out to either true or false. So it can either literally just be the words true or false, or it can be a Bool variable, or it can be something that uses a relational operator. And in this case, we want to see if it's a negative number. So how can we do that again? Okay, if value is less than 0. Yeah, do people follow that? Mm-hmm. If value is less than 0, then we know value is a negative number. And so we can move the code we had typed before that was going to run for every input, and now we put it in here. And stuff in these curly braces will only run if this condition is true. So now let's run the code. Let's say we put in -3.2. After I press enter, what's going to happen? Line 8, we store the value -3.2 in value. So what happens at line 11? So before we get to line 12, let's just stay on line 11. What's happening here? Yeah. So it's checking if value is less than 0. -3.2 is less than 0. So now we come inside these curly braces and we'll do whatever's in here. So what's the value of value right now? -3.2. We multiply by -1. We get 3.2. And we store that here. And so then later when we print it out, once I press enter, it'll come out as 3.2. But now let's run it again, and this time we'll do a positive value, 2.5. So again, what's going to happen at line 11? And is it? It's not. So this is going to come out to true or false? False. And so because it's false, everything here gets skipped. And we just print out absolute value is value, and we haven't changed value at all. Absolute value is 2.5. Yeah. Yep. So we can even update the comment. We'll calculate absolute value if negative number. Otherwise, we just print it out exactly as it is. One small thing I'll call out is on indentation. Anytime you have curly braces, everything inside the curly braces get indented. So everything in this main function is indented 2 spaces. And then everything in this if statement will be indented an additional 2 spaces. So like this indentation is because of the if statement. And then this indentation is because of the main function. And it just makes the code easier to read, right? If you were to look at it now, very quickly you can see like, okay, this code is only going to be run inside that if block. If we, just to show you what it would look like if we did an indent and everything looked like this, now it becomes a little bit harder to see what's going on, right? It's like a very subtle difference, but the indentation makes a big difference when you're trying to read code. So everything gets indented once for the main, and then everything inside the if block gets indented one more time, one more level. All right, any questions on this program? Okay. I know for some, it can be a little bit tough to visualize this just in code. I know for me it is. And so we have these things called flowcharts that help us visualize it with diagrams and shapes as well. So in a flowchart, the rectangles are essentially actions that are happening in the code. So you don't have to say, like, define this variable, do this, do that. You kind of give a summary. And so the summary we had for this top one was ask user for a value and store it. So that's the first thing that happens in our program. Ask user for a value. Yep. What's the next thing that happens in our code after we ask the user for the value and we stored it? What do we do next? If statement. So we're checking, is the value negative? And to do that, we just said value is less than 0. And this can only be one of two things. It can either be true or it can be false. There's no maybe or in between. So in the true case, what do we do? Yeah, so we'll say multiply value by -1. And in the false case, we don't do anything. It just keeps going. And then at the end, after this if statement runs, it comes back and joins the main flow. And then we print out absolute value. Any questions on this? Everyone good? Is it a little bit helpful to see it visualized this way as well?
Yeah.
So especially if you learn better this way, it can help even when you're coding to kind of jot down some notes like this. You know, you don't have to do it super formally. You can do whatever structure you want. Generally, in code flowcharts, we use diamonds for conditional statements, and then we use conditional statement meaning like the if-else statement, something that has a condition. And then rectangles are generally just like, you know, text boxes for general actions in the code. Cool. No questions? Sweet. So here's the syntax. Again, a lot of information on this slide, but hopefully the example in the flowchart helps capture a lot of it. We first start by putting in the keyword if. So if you remember when we went back to like illegal variable names, if would be an illegal variable name because that's a special C++ keyword. If you type in the word if, the C++ compiler is expecting you're going to be doing some sort of if statement. So if, and then you have parentheses, and in the parentheses you have your condition. And what two values must the condition come out to? It can only evaluate to two things. True or false. Yep, the condition must always come out to true or false. And so you can either put a bool variable there, you can literally just put in the words true or false, or you use one of the 6 relational operators that we learned about. In the majority of cases, you'll be using one of these relational operators in there. And then finally, the code, you can put multiple lines of code inside the curly braces, and they'll only run if the condition is true. Everyone with me?
Yes.
Any questions? Okay. One thing I'll note, normally we put semicolons at the end of lines in C++. Note that for the if statement, we don't put a semicolon after the curly brace. There will be semicolons for the code in here, but there's nothing after the curly brace. It's because that's signifying like we have a block of code, so it's not like a complete statement. So it's a block of code that's going to run. Cool. Now at the end of last lecture, someone asked, what if we actually do want to do something in the false case? In this example, for the false case, we just kept going and we didn't do anything. But you know, there could be some instances, like the egg instance, right? If we have eggs, we can make an omelet. Else, or otherwise, we have to go and buy eggs. And so in both cases, we do something different. And so to represent that in code, we can use what's called an if-else statement. So let's use that egg example. Oops. Okay. So we'll ask the user, how many eggs do they have? How many eggs does user have? What can we do in here that can kind of result in a true or false?
How many eggs you need?
Sure. So let's say we had a variable like num eggs, and we'll say num eggs greater than, let's say 2. Let's say you always make omelets with at least 2 eggs. So we'll say like greater than or equal to 2. What should we do in the true case?
Make an omelet.
Yep. Say make an omelet. Else, if we don't have enough eggs, the false case.
Go buy it.
Yep. Go buy some eggs. And then if we want, the code can come back together and we can do one more thing. Or you can just leave it blank. It's not that you have to do something at the end of the program. We could just say like, thanks for using the program. I don't know. You don't have to put something here, but if you want, you could then do it, and both branches will come back, and then they'll both print out this final part. Any questions on this flowchart before we see it in code? Okay, let's put it into, yeah. Yep. Okay, so let's put it into code. So ask user for eggs. And then we'll tell them to perform an action. And then we'll thank the user at the end. Okay, so how many eggs do you have? In this case, what data type can we use? Yeah, so they're probably, you can't really have like a half egg, right? So in this case, we'll call it num eggs. You'll kind of see this a lot for counters. Num is like short for number. It's just kind of a common variable name, num, and then whatever you're trying to count. And so we're going to store this here. And now we want to perform an action based on number of eggs. So what can we put in this condition here?
If num eggs greater than 30.
Yep. And then we'll say 2. We can kind of choose whatever value we want. And what did we say we wanted to do in this case when num eggs is greater than or equal to 2?
Make a
Yep. All right. Now's where we're going to be introducing new syntax. It's called else. This is also a special C++ keyword. You'll notice it like changes colors once you type it in. And then it's the same thing with the brackets.
You would do it on that line with the.
Yeah, like the code will work even if you did it on separate lines, but there's like what we call style.
Right.
And style is most programs you see will do it like this. Yeah. Else, so this is going to be the false case. What do we want to do in the false case?
Buy another egg.
Yep. Buy some eggs. Oops. And then at the end, we'll just like think. All right, let's run it. Someone give me a value. 14. So once I press enter, num eggs is going to equal the value 14. What's going to happen here at line 11?
14 greater than 2.
Okay, so is that true or false?
True.
And if it's true, does the first set run or the second set?
First.
First. So we'll say, make an omelet. Thanks for using the egg program. Everyone follow? Okay. Someone give me a number that will hit the other case.
1.
Okay. So what's going to happen at line 11?
False.
It's going to be false. So what ends up like,
Boxing eggs.
yep, so we skip this, right? If it's false, this first one won't run, and we go straight to the else case. So we'll say, buy some eggs. So notice both times we ran it, it always said, thanks for using the egg program, because that wasn't in any sort of conditional statement. But it either said make an omelet or it said buy some eggs. It never said both. And it's impossible for both to run because this condition will always be either true or false. It can never be both, right? Yeah.
If you like put the cursor right before else and press enter, will it still work the same way?
Yeah, the code will still run.
Okay.
It's just generally the style is to just keep them on the same line like that, but it will still run. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the grade, like it should use notes to yourself.
Yep, exactly. So you can do it with 2 forward slashes. And it's notes to myself, but it's also notes for other people that are reading my code as well to very clearly see what's going on. And so I'd highly recommend it. I forgot to tell Wednesday's lab last week. I told Friday and Monday lab. But when you're doing your lab problems, even before you start coding, it helps to just list out like the 2 or 3 things you'll be doing in your program with comments. And then you can write the code under each of them. Yeah.
And then the other way is to do like a forward slash and then an asterisk, like a little star.
Yeah, we'll learn that one later. That's if you want to do like a bunch of comments, like 3 or 4 lines, then you can do that. But I don't want to confuse people now. Yeah. All right. So again, here's the code. Let me know if anyone has any questions. Do if-else statements, like, obviously we'll practice the syntax in labs and homework, and you'll get practice actually doing it. But does the high-level concept make sense? Yeah, can people give me like a thumbs up, sideways, down, just for me to see where people are at with this? Okay, cool. And do people see like the use of it? Like why we need this? Okay. I think the absolute value one really highlights like you can't write an absolute value program without if statements, right? Because then based on the input, it really matters what you do. Sweet. So just putting up the syntax for if else. Again, ton of information on the slide, but you kind of know a little bit of each of this, right? So again, we start off with if. In the condition, it's either going to be true or it's going to be false. We write all the code that does something in the first set of curly braces. And then in the second set of curly braces after the else, that's our false case. And then I just put in a little coding style note about the spacing. Sweet. Okay, so I'm gonna pass around some paper and I'm gonna have you all draw some flowcharts. But first, before we go into that, let's just recap kind of what each of the shapes represent. So does anyone remember what the diamond generally represents in flowcharts?
Conditional statement.
Yep, condition. So this is what kind of maps to like the if else. And what are the rectangles? Yeah, kind of outcomes. If we were to generalize it a little bit more. It's kind of the, yeah, I think outcomes is a good word. It's like the action or outcome of the code. So, you know, if we're asking the user for information, that'll be like its own action. If we print something out to the user, that's an action. When we multiplied the value by -1 to get the absolute value, that was like an action. So those generally go in the rectangles. And then what do the arrows represent here?
The direction.
Yeah, so it's like kind of the ordering of the code. I think some of you saw in lab, if you try to like sum, what was it? If you try to sum 2 variables, but you put that at the very start of your code as opposed to the end after the user's given you information, then it doesn't work, right? So in this example, let's do this one here. The egg one, right? Okay, so let's say like we asked the user how many eggs they had at the end. What would happen to this code?
You'll wait till the end, is it?
So
Error.
it will error because we're coming down, right? The code goes top to bottom. So, we don't do anything at the start, and then we check is num_eggs greater than or equal to 2? But we don't know what num_eggs is at this point. So the code's going to error because we haven't defined a variable called num_eggs. So the ordering of your code is super important, and flowcharts, the arrows kind of show you the order in which the code is running. Ordering of code. Okay, so I'm gonna have people get into groups of like 2, kind of just across your table. I'll go and grab some paper, but in the meantime, you can start looking at this code and start thinking about how it will map to a flowchart.
So the overall objective of the reason of this class is to have the user determine whether or not they should wear jackets, depending on the weather. So it's saying that if temperature is less than 50 degrees,
Hey, that was beautiful. It's like God works in the
not gonna wear a t-shirt.
I did it, bro.
Yeah,
Like, no, it's only because like I kept getting stuff wrong because it would be like watching it and I was just put that number.
It's like you gotta do it. Take 10. I mean, it's 20 questions. It ain't up to 10. I ain't hear
Did you guys take the test yet?
I'm too fast, bro.
I don't pay attention, bro. I just teach my.
Remember, it'll look something kind of like this, but maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, I tell you, I missed like a part of the question.
Same thing.
Honestly, if you do the retest twice, you're gonna get one grade.
The test was
Your homework is
Alright, so what is the temperature?
So there's a couple things. So,
you gonna put in your temperature if it's raining.
What are the triangles say? Like,
do we do 2 separate flowcharts?
I guess you kind of ran out of space on your paper, but you can put it, you can kind of draw a small one in here. Okay. Repeat.
The graph area, how it looks.
Yeah. Like this one here?
Start off this one here, right?
Okay, people can keep working, but generally to get the group started. Start with the rectangle at the top. What's like the first general action we're asking? We're doing. Yeah, so let's just say like get in. Get weather. We can kind of combine it. Get weather and temperature from user. You could also do it as 2 separate rectangles if you want. From user. Okay, then the code continues. What's the next thing that happens?
Yeah, temperature less than. Oh, my bad. Temperature less than 50.
Yeah, okay, so we kind of got weather and temperature and we stored it. That's kind of what that box represents. And then we have a conditional, right? Where we have the diamond. And what should we put in the diamond?
If temperature is less than 50.
Okay. Temperature. And is less than or equal. So there's an equal sign there too. Is equal to 50. So this is either going to be one of 2 values. What are the 2 values? What are the 2 things? A condition.
True.
Yes, true. So one side will be true, right? What are we doing on the true side? Jacket. All right. The other thing it could be
T-shirt.
false. Sorry, I can't write that way. T-shirt. All right. And then both of these come back together to the main flow after it's done, right? And then it continues. This program's more advanced than the other ones we've done. It keeps going. What's the next thing that happens after the jacket or t-shirt?
The weather.
Okay, so, and what is it? Like, what shape should we draw? Okay, so we have another conditional, right?
Yeah.
So we have another diamond below, and we're trying to check if weather equals rainy, right? So weather equals rainy. What do we do if it's true? All right, umbrella. And then that's it. We could have multiple things. Like we could say do an umbrella, wear a jacket, and I probably should have done that just to see, but you could have multiple rectangles here. But in this case, we just have one and it goes back. And then in the false case, nothing actually happens. So there's no like rectangles on the false case. It just comes back, right? And then we end.
Thanks.
Do we say, oh yeah, sorry, we say thanks. Good catch. Thanks. You know, the code could have, we didn't even have to include the thanks at the end. It would have just ended, but yeah, in this case, we have a rectangle that says thanks. Cool. Any questions on that? Sweet. So again, a lot of information. We're going to be working with this today in lab and on the upcoming homework, and we're going to be kind of on if-else statements for the next couple weeks. So especially if some of the parts in this code, like notice how much we're using, right? We have data types, we have variables, we have cout, we have cin, we have the program structure with the include statements and the int main. We have relational operators, and in the previous program, we even had arithmetic operators. So, you know, in just 2 weeks, we've already learned a lot. We've done a lot. We're going to use these next 2 weeks to just really practice these skills and keep putting it all together. Everyone good with that? All right. Again, office hours, literally come by my room right now if you haven't done it already, just so that I can mark you down. Should be the easiest homework point to get all semester. And then just note that we have more times for you if you just want to come in and work. Even if you don't have a specific question, you can still come into these working sessions. Yeah. 225, right in there. I'll be headed in. Yep.
I did the last one.